Today we are listening to Stacey Greenwell, who is the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Research in the University Libraries. And she's just talking about career management and kind of taking an active role in being in charge of your career. Thank you, Stacey.
Thanks, Meg. Well, thank you all for having me here. What I thought I would do is something just really informal. Talk a little bit about my own experience, my own career path, and some things that I think helped me along the way and might be useful to you all too. And I won't talk too long, then you can ask me questions and we can just have a discussion. I think that'll be a lot more fun in the end than listening to me talk on and on and on. But yeah, I am fortunate to be Associate Dean of the Libraries for our public service area. I'm also, in my free time, a doctoral candidate in the College of Education, Instructional Design. And I'm very involved in SLA, particularly at the international level. So kind of how I got here, I can't believe I'm going to tell this story, but okay, I'll tell this story even though it's going to be recorded. I'm one of those strange people who wanted to be a librarian since I was 5 years old. So I will just admit that up front. You know, back then, the delivery of information was quite a bit different than it is today, though, connecting people with information was what it was all about and still is today. But I went so far as to, make catalog cards for some of my books and things when I was a kid. So, I really kind of had an idea this is what I wanted to do for a while. I hear you laughing over there, sure. But having that interest early on, that means I've actually been working in libraries for over 20 years because I started when I was in high school. I started working in a public library, which was a great idea because that was right at the time when libraries were going online, but ours hadn't yet, so I learned how to file catalog cards, which was pretty nifty. You guys won't have to worry about that now, but it was a fun art to know at the time, and I got to also help with actually putting the catalog online. We would take these drawers of catalog cards and walk around and check the shelf and update each card, and then we'd send the cards off and they would be turned into computer files. So it was really super cool to get to kind of be there at the cusp of things as they were changing. But anyway, I had a lot of different library jobs along the way because I did start out in public libraries, and then I came here to UK to library school. The Young Library was just starting to be built at that time. I happened to graduate the same month that it opened, so I never was a user of the Young Library, which was kind of too bad. But I worked at the public library downtown. I worked in like 2 or 3 different jobs in the UK library system as a student worker. I was in periodicals, I was in monograph processing, I worked at circulation downtown. I did all these different things. Anyway, my point with all of that, bringing that back to career management, is I really think that one of the things that helped me get to where I am today is a lot of different experience. Many of them were just, at the time were just student jobs, part-time jobs. Sometimes I had a couple of jobs. I would work in a couple of different libraries. But it was really nice just to get a feel for, what's it like to work behind a service desk, at a university library, or what's it like to work at one in public library. Behind the scenes work, what's that all about? In monograph processing, which was actually on this floor of this building, this looked very different back then, they trusted me enough to add books to catalog, so that explains some of the problems with our catalog. But it was a neat experience because I was getting to look up OCLC records and all this cool stuff, and it's funny, that's actually what I thought I wanted to do. I thought, hey, this cataloging gig seems pretty cool. These people roll in and they do this work all day and then they leave. And I thought, yeah, I might like this. It's nice and quiet. It's not being yelled at the service desk, at the downtown public library about fines or, lost books or any number of issues that you get at a service desk. So I guess that's my second point, because I never was a cataloger at all. As soon as I got out of school, I was a reference librarian. I was a reference librarian for a few months, and this was down at a public library in Western Kentucky. The IT person left, they said, "Hey, Stacy, you're just out of school. You're young. You seem like you're probably not too scared of computers. Would you take on the IT job?" I said, "Sure, why not?" I'd had Joe's class to prepare me, and that was about the extent of my experience with computers at the time. It was all entirely learned on the job. So, point 2, be very flexible. I thought I was going to be a cataloger for a period there. Well, in fact, when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be, checking books out with cards and all that. We all saw how that worked out. So be very flexible, because sometimes you don't know where things will lead you. Because I'll tell you, taking that IT job at that public library, I did that for about 3 years. By the time I left, I was on the management team at a very young age, which was pretty awesome. I did learn a lot about computers by then. I actually helped us automate do some more automated processes and things in the library. We set up our first website and our first email and all that. So I got to do a lot of cool stuff. If I hadn't just taken that jump and said, "Oh, I'll try. I'll be an IT librarian, sure." But it did lead me to getting my first faculty position here at UK, because I had developed all that experience working in the public library. So that, again, that flexibility, who knows what I would be doing now if I hadn't taken that step. So at UK, I've done a bunch of different things. I did start out in our library IT department, doing a lot of computer support and that kind of thing, which actually is a pretty fun job. Your patrons are the people who work in the library. So, their computer breaks, they need to set up a presentation or whatever. I did a lot of that kind of stuff. Also a lot, of technology training and those sorts of things. When we started planning the Information Commons in Young, the hub, as it's known, I was fortunate to be on that planning committee, and then was its first director. So that was pretty neat. It was kind of a nice mesh with my IT skills from that last job, and then all the public service I had done before. And so that ultimately led me to the associate dean position that I've been in for just a couple of years now. So really, that's kind of just the highlights of my career. But I would say, yeah, one, getting all that experience early on, or even if you haven't gotten that experience yet, start now. There's a lot of student positions. There are a lot of volunteer opportunities even in the libraries, potentially in the area. Getting that experience, but also being flexible. Sometimes you might change your path and you don't realize it's going to change, and it'll keep changing. And especially as our profession has changed in the past few years. What we started out in is not what it is today, and who knows what it'll be in the next few years. And that's kind of, that's one of the things that makes it really exciting about being in our field, is that it keeps changing and our role keeps changing. And that's part of, too, why I'm working on an instructional design degree, because I feel like instructional design ties in very nicely with what we do in the library science world. So the experience, flexibility, and the third thing that I'm going to talk the most about is professional involvement. That has helped me enormously, getting me to where I'm fortunate to be today. Just getting yourself out there with SLA, for example, that you're all here, and hopefully you're all members. It's a good time to be a member when you're a student, because you don't have to spend nearly as much to join these organizations as you will once you graduate. But joining a variety of organizations and getting involved. The involvement is the key part, coming to meetings, meeting people, especially like with Kentucky SLA. The student chapter works very closely with the actual Kentucky chapter, so there are a lot of librarians and various organizations in the region who come to the meetings that you can network with to help you get a job, which of course is what it all comes down to here, right? So taking leadership roles too, now it's never too early to start doing those kinds of things now. I know a lot of things I've done in my own career. Really, I've been helped through taking leadership roles in a professional organization. The first few professional jobs I had, I didn't manage anyone to start out. I didn't really have a budget or, things like that. But in a professional organization, I took on one role where I planned a conference. So I had to manage a bunch of people, a bunch of speakers, a budget, Everything, logistics, making sure food was there and those kinds of things. Those are great skills to have. And you may not get them at work right away in your first job. As a student, you may not have those skills now, but taking volunteer leadership positions, you can develop those. And as you kind of move up the ranks, you can take greater ones. One that I specifically set out to do was be on the finance committee of the entire SLA organization. I mean, we're dealing with, several $1 million budget there. And that was excellent experience, and that was not experience I necessarily would have gotten in my day job, but I got it through SLA. I helped the organization, but it also helped me gain skills that I may not necessarily have gotten. And other things too, like, whenever I ran for office once, I had to use a teleprompter to do my speeches. It's not something you do every day, but hey, it's pretty cool that I know how to do that now. So I think just thinking about professional involvement as not only, neat stuff to list on your Vita to help you get a job, but also have some goals. Think about what are the kinds of things what you want to focus on. Maybe you haven't led a meeting before, and the thought of that kind of freaks you out. Well, pick a committee or something where you can lead meetings and you can practice, getting people in a room and getting them motivated to do something, and setting goals together and getting things accomplished. It's a great experience. It's generally fairly risk-free because, again, it is volunteer work. You want to make sure you do the best possible job with it, but it's different than what you're doing every day at work. So you have all those different opportunities for self-improvement through professional involvement. But like I said, it's not too early to get started now. Now I think it's the best time to get started. And that's one of the things that I wish I had done in my career. I actually did not get involved in SLA until I came here to UK as a faculty member, and I wish I had been involved early on because I could have picked up a whole lot of great skills and met a lot of people had I done that. So let's see, getting yourself out there. I guess other things are pretty obvious, especially to you guys. I mean, I hope everybody has a LinkedIn profile, or if not, is thinking about getting a LinkedIn profile. I hope you have a web presence of some sort, whether it's your blog or, one of those, there are a lot of different pages you can have. It's just like a basic page. This is me. This is a little bit about me. I think there's actually one called about.me. Just a place to organize all of your professional stuff. And it may not seem like you have a lot of that right now, but you do. You have papers you've written. If you're involved in the student chapter of SLA, for example, you've got leadership already that you can talk about. You may have things from, a previous career or whatever. You've got a nice place to put all of that stuff. But collecting it now, getting your professional presence out there now, I think is really important. I bet you probably are all on Twitter, but thinking more strategically about how you use it, like retweeting librarians that are fairly well known, maybe engaging in conversations with them, hey, great point you made on that, what about this, or just more ways to be out there, to get your name out there, to be more visible, will help you in getting a job, but will also help you in the long run in moving ahead. And you can start, you're already writing lots of papers and things. I'm sure you don't have a lot of time, but there are opportunities for publication right now. They may not be, peer-reviewed journals or anything, but SLA newsletters. There are a number of SLA newsletters that would, love to see an article from you. It could be something that you've modified from a class assignment, about a great new technology tool, or book reviews. Gosh, I did book reviews for years, and that's still something that's fairly easy to find and do even as a student. So again, you've got more publications, before you're even finished with school. So, and of course, putting those on your LinkedIn, putting those on your website. Another good opportunity too is presenting at conferences, maybe even as a group. The KLA, Kentucky Library Association, is a great place for students to present. We've seen more and more students presenting in the last few years. Maybe some of you can go in together, or work with a faculty member, or work with a librarian that you might be working with in a student job, and do a presentation. poster sessions are really an easy way to get started, especially if you're not necessarily comfortable with getting up there and doing the speaking part of it. But you'll see, like in Kentucky, you'll probably see a call for the spring conference, the Kentucky SLA and KLA Academic and Special Section Spring Conference here really soon. There'll be a call for mini sessions, a call for poster sessions. So just thinking about doing things like that as well now, so that you'll get some practice and you'll get yourself out there and you can build on those things over time throughout your career. And you do a lot of them in the state. Eventually somebody will ask you to do one, at a regional conference or a national conference, and that's how all this kind of thing works. It just builds on itself. So I have talked for a while, so I think what I'm going to do is stop talking now and see what questions you have. Let's just have a conversation.
One of the first speakers that I think has been here who's mentioned LinkedIn and highlighted it as something useful. Usually if it's mentioned, I've heard it more downplayed. Do you feel that that's an important way that a lot of profiles and resumes and business networking is happening with librarians these days?
I don't know that people are necessarily in the library world, and this is just my opinion, facts to base this in, but I don't know that people are getting hired, but I think people are probably getting selected for presentations or committee work. When your name is out there more and more and you keep popping up on things, people might associate you with, oh, that's that person who does this with collection development, or you just keep seeing the name. But as far as getting a job, I don't know that necessarily would be the thing you would want to focus on. But having a profile, making sure it's updated, that's another thing I should mention too. Anytime you create any of this stuff, if you don't keep up with it, it's better to just delete it. Just having it, it's just one more way, because lots of people here you can connect with. So does that?
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about your job now and what it involves?
Oh yeah, sure.
Much better with your first G.
Well, as Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and Research, that's really is a fancy way of saying public services. So the public services and the Young Library, so the Interlibrary Loan and Circulation, AV, reference, those areas report to me, as well as most of our branch libraries. And so, it's a lot of management. I mean, it's almost all management at this point. And until fairly recently, I used to teach library instruction sessions, work on desks, do all those kinds of things. But now it really is it's an administrative job. So I spend a lot of time, advocating for, describing what our division does and what we need, both to the library administration and beyond. I spend a lot of time out on campus talking about what the library does, and I look for partnerships, I look for opportunities to work together on campus. I do a little bit of fundraising now, actually, or just assistance with that, spending a lot of time with external audiences, alumni groups and that kind of thing. But then, of course, there's just a lot of day-to-day management responsibility, making decisions on setting policies, dealing with the student budget, approving orders and things like that. I mean, a lot of just day-to-day kind of stuff. But then also, thinking about the big picture, where our university library is headed. I mean, because again, we're, at this really exciting time. Things are changing, and keep changing. We keep saying that every year, but that's just kind of how it is. What does it mean now that maybe we don't need as many print collections on campus, for example, on our central campus? So, what does it mean to, can we move them off-site and then repurpose the space for other things? And what are those other things? Do we take more of a role in technology support? Do we take more of a role in, curriculum development? We take a lot of role in, certainly in, teaching and learning. with, doing information literacy instruction, those kinds of things. So, the big picture stuff is what I love to think about and what we love to talk about and try to move toward. But I guess at the end of the day, I do spend a lot of time, in meetings, approving orders and dealing with policy issues and those kinds of things. So.
Can you tell us what Sean does?
Sean deals with a lot of problems. I think that's probably a good way to describe it. A lot of day-to-day issues.
If you do more, I do more day-to-day. So I don't get to do some future thinking, but not a lot. That's kind of her role. My role is to keep the problems from percolating up to her. And I think her other part of her management team, Valerie, Ferry, and I, we do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings up a good point when you're out looking for a job. If you're a problem solver, tell people that. It's a very good thing, because in our profession, those people are kind of rare and few and far between. So if you're good at and excel at finding solutions to problems, then tell someone, I can do that for you.
How do you get good at that?
Experience.
Practice.
Practice,
Yes.
lots of practice.
Wow.
I mean, just lots of practice. And it doesn't have to be something that's really like bad. This is her thing, but you asked me a question. So.
No, please. It's a discussion.
Yeah, it's not so much, it's just practice. And I think a lot of things, here's another lesson you should probably learn, is that we as supervisors and managers, we love solutions.
Yes.
So if you see a problem and you can find a solution that's not going to cost us a lot of money and it's not going to upset a whole lot of apple carts, that's going to move the patrons' needs forward, do it. And then tell us, I saw this, I did X, and Y is working, and then I'm a happy man. I go home, and and all that good stuff. So just practice. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be something like if there's a handout where you're working, if you're working in the library, it needs to be updated. Take it upon yourself, just try to update it, see if somebody responds to it.
Yeah, and I think some of that you can get in professional organizations too. Again, because it's not your everyday job, you can experiment maybe a little bit more with those kinds of things. But yeah, in any job, don't just walk in. My advice: don't just walk in and say, "This doesn't work. This is awful." I hate. I don't like whatever's going on here. You can come in and present it much more positively and say, "Well, we're having issues with this. But I might recommend that we do it this way." I think presenting a solution, anytime you have an issue, that shows that you've thought about it and that you're not just complaining. That you want to help be a part of the management team. You want to help solve the problem. So even in your very first job, I think that's a great thing to do, because I know we do get tired of. Well, I mean.
This doesn't work. Why are you making me do this?
I don't like this, but I don't like this, but how about if you consider it this way, or how about if we consider it this way? So, that's a good point.
You mentioned earlier outreach. How much has outreach become a part of what you're doing?
Most of mine is related to really kind of to fundraising and PR and those kinds of things. I mean,
do you have suggestions on how to start helping with that before you're as high up in the structure as you are?
Yeah, so I think like in some of your initial positions, volunteering to take on things, coming up with ideas, hey, we haven't targeted this group of students on campus or this group of, within the community. I think this program might be a good fit, coming up with maybe smaller events and programs to reach out to those communities. You get, again, going back to professional organizations, we do so much membership recruitment and PR and that kind of thing, like if you're chair of a chapter or a division or president of a chapter, that you kind of get practice in outreach of a sort, because you're reaching out to other librarians to try to get them to join your organization or participate in your organization. Really, I think a lot of the skills we talk about, you can practice them and learn them in a professional organization.
So could you maybe talk about, most of us probably are not going to get our dream job as our first professional, experience, and you've obviously done a lot of different things. Can you maybe talk about how you what's your advice for applying for those positions, even though it might be something that we don't want to do long term?
Well, yeah, I know what you mean. When you're out there looking for a job,
I
sometimes
don't know
it's-
if I worded that right.
No, but I
You know what I'm
mean,
talking
it's like,
about.
yeah, this may not be a thing I really want to do, but I want to apply for it and make it look like something I want to do. Yeah, I think, finding pieces of that job maybe that do fit with you, what you want to do, that are skills you have, say maybe there's one aspect of it that's public service and you really want to do public service even though maybe it's not in the environment that you had in mind. Talk about your customer service skills, your desire to do public service. Focus on the things that, that are your greatest strengths and maybe that interest you the most. Or even, things that, you know a little bit about but want to learn more about. I'd like in a, some kind of technology job, say you have this set of skills, but, this is something that you wanted to do. Talk about how you want to expand your skills and you feel like, it would be a good fit. To do those kinds of things, that you're willing to grow in the position, and you're willing to learn, and you feel like you fit, these pieces of it, but this is a piece that you want to, you really want to do. So that might be one way to approach it.
How, this is a general question, how has the marketing of library services changed as far as when you're trying to market the UK libraries to undergraduates who are, kind of born into this digital, well, most of their education has been in the digital times that we're in now. So how has the marketing changed as far as to get them interested in using the library resources?
Well, over a greater period of time, it's changed pretty radically, because there was one point where they would just march everyone in, and we would look at the print indexes over in the reference area, and the reference librarians would wave at them, and we'd walk them back out, that kind of thing. It was a lot about orientation, and research libraries particularly have gotten more away from orientation kinds of things and are more about information literacy skills, critical thinking skills, and those kinds of things in our instruction. So we're doing less of that orientation kind of stuff and more of let's actually work with you on an assignment. So we're not reaching them that way necessarily as much as we used to. So now we're relying more on, social media, a lot on social media. We still don't necessarily have students following us on social media. Sometimes it's more, staff, alumni, that kind of thing. So try to reach them that way. Probably the most successful thing in my experience has been connecting with student organizations, connecting with student activities to reach students, to market the library to students. So, K-Week, which is the first year student welcome week here, that's a great example. The library tries to play a role in that and get students in a fun, friendly kind of way. So that's a way to sort of sneak our message in. Speaking in front of groups. Sean and I do that all the time. We speak in front of student government groups, student organizations, just wherever we can get in front of. And again, that's much more of an orientation kind of thing than teaching. But we just wanted to know we're out here. This is our very basic message. These are some basic resources on our website. This is where you can come find us. So. That it's changed very much, and I'm sure it will continue to, especially as more and more students aren't on the physical campus. That's making things much more different because, then we're trying to reach them, say, through Blackboard or, through, through various social channels again, which, it still remains to be seen how successful that is. So, yeah, it's an exciting part of it for sure, the marketing of it, and really a lot of problems that we tend to have, student concerns or complaints or that kind of thing tends to come down to a marketing issue. It's a service we had, they didn't know we had it, or it's something we do and they just weren't aware of it. So marketing is a very important piece of this. Joe.
I was curious about following up on that theme just a little bit, because one of the things you didn't mention very much explicitly in your history is one of your well-known successes, which was the hub and the events that were centered around that for some years. They would bring in large numbers of undergraduates and such. And so I was just curious about how that fit into that overall kind of marketing to the undergraduates and sort of where it's at or going now.
Well, we did have to, we used to have an event every year in the library. It was basically a big party that I threw, and I had a lot of help, but we threw a big party, and it was pretty silly. We had video games and palm readers, and you could get your picture made in a photo booth with a silly hat, and it's just the kind of stuff that first-year students and librarians enjoy. We scaled back this past year, just primarily due to staffing constraints and budget issues. But what we did instead was try to do more things like reaching out to individual groups and classes, offering more tours. We had a couple of different groups come in that we didn't this last time related to first year. So, those kinds of things. But yeah, I mean, I hope we can go back to having some kind of, party, perhaps in a different form. We are currently working on a project on the second floor of the Young Library to bring in some different kinds of furniture and technologies and things that sort of complement what we did in the basement and in the hub. And it's my hope that we might have some kind of celebration to launch that, and then maybe future celebrations that showcase all of it. So.
And just kind of following up too with the virtual kind of environment, there was a time when Second Life was being touted as one way to really, try and get into that environment where, we were maybe looking at students who aren't coming to campus and such. Is there still much interest in that, or are there other tools that are being looked at as the sort of the next wave? I know that some of the organizations have sort of seemingly stepped back a little bit from the Second Life, but I know that it was something that you were interested in and active with.
Yeah, I think that's another thing you'll find in your library career, I hope, is that there are a lot of librarians who love to try out new technologies and just see, hey, how can we reach our patrons with this or that? Or, and it's great learning, and sometimes it doesn't work as well as you might have hoped, but you have to try. I mean, you have to be ready to not be successful all the time in order to be creative and come up with something that does work. So yeah, we dabbled around in Second Life quite a bit, and I believe there are some of our folks in the library still do that. I don't so much anymore, but the idea of having a virtual environment, for interactions with students, it's a little bit richer than just chatting back and forth in a text window. It's pretty exciting, and I think other things will come along to replace it. I know there are some other virtual world products out there now. I don't know if any of them, I haven't been following it as closely, but I don't know that there are any that have gained the attention that Second Life did a few years ago. But it seems, it seems reasonable that might be something that we'll see more of that in the future. Because it was fun. It was really more Beth Kramer, built this beautiful young library on our island, and we had a little reference desk, and you go up and ask a reference question, and we got a few students who did that, and so hey, that's great. But I think right now we're experimenting, also about this idea, we're experimenting with a Facebook group where students can ask questions, and librarians or other students can respond. And I think that might generate a little bit more interest than the virtual world did, because the technology barrier. You have to set up a client, have a computer with for Second Life, have a computer with a certain level of video memory and those kinds of things. And Facebook, you can just jump on it like we all do. So.
And there are so many people on Facebook. I mean, it was always a little bit smaller group. I think it was exploring some of this more virtual.
Yeah, I think so too. But part of the fun of being an information professional is exploring those environments and is keeping up with those. Some of us who've been around a little bit, a while, remember, when some of these were new. I mean, we jumped on Facebook back whenever it was just for university people, and even really for students, and we were out there in it.
John, making funny faces does not encourage.
What are you talking
Okay.
about? I was talking
How
about-
could we find out more, especially for the virtual students, ways in which we could publish while still in the program?
Oh, yeah.
How could we go about finding out more information on that?
A lot
If we were
of,
interested.
yeah, I mean, from what I'm aware of, there are a lot of scattered things out there. For example, SLA IT division. I mean, I've worked with them for many, many years. I know for a fact they have a bulletin that comes out 4 times a year. It's, and they do publish, you know, somewhat substantial articles in it, and it's read by a lot of people. And that's just one division of SLA. You know, if there's another subject area that interests you, many of them have bulletins as well. You know, SLA Academic Division has a blog, and we do try to write somewhat lengthier, more thoughtful posts on there than just, hey, we're having an event, which is a lot of what you see on blogs now. But we do tend to write lengthier things, but SLA Academic is always looking for authors for that. You know, the old-fashioned way, listservs, you'd be surprised how many opportunities come across listservs. There's an information literacy listserv that I've been on for years and years, and a lot of stuff comes across that. Opportunities to review books, opportunities to participate. Like I saw something recently about volunteer research projects. You know, just a lot of different things to kind of get out there more. Let's see, what else?
The Journal for Academic.
Well, that's true, yeah. That is the academic division of SLA does have a peer-reviewed journal, and we do take submissions there. I will say we are fairly rigorous in that journal. Yeah, we send a lot of stuff back and require a lot of corrections, but that would be a great place to get published because that is peer-reviewed. Education libraries, I think, too, with SLA Education Division is peer-reviewed. But some of the newslettery kind of things are a little bit easier to jump into. But content, you know, people are always looking for content, it seems, especially, you know, you're generating a lot of content now as students, so, you know, see how you can parlay that into something published online. You know, publishing your own blog, too, there are still certainly a lot of people out there who do that and get, you know, have built a lot of their reputation in the library world on being a blogger, you know, and that's an opportunity as well. It's just, it takes a lot of time and effort because, you know, that's all about keeping it updated, keeping it fresh, keeping it real.
I was thinking about asking you, and it might be too much to ask really, but like, do you feel like something has really changed in your philosophy about being a librarian, like that you wish you had thought about before? Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like since I've been in grad school alone, I've had all these different ideas about what a librarian is, and I was just kind of wondering if you had anything like that.
That's a big question.
Yeah, it's a really big question.
Yeah.
I always want to ask people that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know, you know, again, when a lot of us got started with this career path, it looked, you know, the mechanics of it were a whole lot different than they are today. And, you know, keep changing. But, yeah, I think what a librarian is, too, keeps changing because, you know, especially when you're involved in SLA. I feel like SLA should be paying me for this. When you're involved in SLA, you do meet information professionals who are in a variety of positions that aren't things that are librarian as we once thought. You know, there are people who work in knowledge management, you know, competitive intelligence, you know, the kinds of things where, you know, you do library work, but you don't work in a library. It's not at all, you know, reading stories to children or any of the kinds of things that people think of as being a librarian. But those are really, I know, to me, they're really exciting opportunities. You know, you know, I've met the librarian, you know, who works for Target. I mean, how cool is that? You know, we all love Target. You know, you can actually be the librarian there. Who knew? But you know, their jobs are very, very different from, you know, say what mine is, or you know what, you know, something else might be. But yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, my philosophy has changed. You know, what does it mean to be an information professional? What will it mean to be one in 5 years? You know, that raises the bigger question, what will an academic library, in my case, what will a research institution of our size, for example, what will the academic library look like in 5 years? And what it looks like now and what it will look like then are probably going to be pretty different. The moving of print collections off campus, the increase in open access journals. We will have less to buy. We'll have more to organize and collect and help people use. But those kinds of roles, back in the day of let's order some cereals, check them in, put labels on them, and keep them on a shelf. That's changed. So then what? Then our role becomes more about education, perhaps, which is a lot of what we do now, rather than what it used to be. So I don't know. I could just go on.
Yeah, I just like to know what people are really thinking about what they're doing. I guess.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot. There are more and more of us doing consulting and research and those kinds of things. I know there's, I obviously, in my spare time doctoral program, I do a lot of reading about information literacy and instructional design models, particularly as they relate to information literacy. And there's some research groups out there doing amazing things with, looking at how do students use information, how do they find information. What's it like to be a first-year student? It's very, very different than what it was like for me to be, in my first year. Those are librarians, though. Many of them, putting this research together, surveying people, and putting those reports out there online. EDUCAUSE does a lot of good ones too, where they just study, students and how they consume information. So. I don't know, that's kind of another role for us maybe too.
Coming from like a management perspective, since you work with many different librarians on campus, how do you try to bridge the gap between the generations? Because you have many different librarians with different skill sets, different technical skills, or their approach or perspective on that. How do you try to bridge the gap to get people on the same page?
It's hard. It's really hard. But there are a lot of things just listening to people, listening to ideas, seeking out opinions from people who have been here for a long time. And, a lot of places there's usually a go-to expert, with this particular subject expertise, or they know a lot about this building and, because they've been here for 30 years or, that kind of thing. But respecting that and, kind of seeking them out. And, sometimes even, when there's a project, maybe getting someone who is a little bit newer to work with someone who has been here for a while on something, trying to get them working together and sharing ideas, because we can all learn from each other, but especially learning when you're newer, learning from someone more experienced is helpful. And all of you in school, fresh out of school, bring a whole new perspective. And I know we're very interested in hearing what you all have to say. Because you're much closer to the student experience, and even what's going on maybe in library science research today than we are necessarily. Those of us who've been in library jobs for a long time.
So. I wanted to follow up just on, I think that question you posed about what the academic library will look like in 5 or 10 years is a really intriguing one. And of course, it's like the magic 8-ball feature is sometimes cloudy, but I wanted to ask your thoughts in terms of 2 big roles that could be changing a lot for academic libraries. And obviously, like you mentioned, education, higher education is changing so much. We've been in the online business for a long time in school, but I think the undergraduate part of the university is really starting to embrace that much more. So do you think that instead of having sort of a separate niche of like a distance learning librarian, that there might be something that's more just, distance learning makes it sound kind of like, well, there's this separate group of people that are very far away. But I think really, there's going to be a lot of students who are going to be living 2 blocks away from campus who are going to be taking online classes, and that they'll need a lot of different kinds of support, but won't necessarily be thinking first about coming to the library to get it. And then the other half of this I was wondering about is this interest in institutional repositories and how libraries can become more involved with publishing and storing and disseminating information and research that's being produced in a university. So do you have thoughts about
Sure.
that part of the future?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of academic libraries do tend to have a distance learning department, a distance learning librarian, dedicated to those kinds of issues. And we do, and I'm sure will for some time. But more and more of us do have to think about distant students. And I think, really all of us, have had to, embrace providing more instruction online, even if it's not, full-blown instructional tutorials, video tutorials, and those kinds of things. But, LibGuides is a good example of that. That's a product that many libraries use. If you don't know much about that, that'd be a good thing to check into. You probably already do, but it's basically just a research guide around a particular topic. But I think all of us developing better skills at providing that kind of information in an appropriately designed way where people will learn. Not let's just put a whole bunch of text on a page and call it a day, but understanding better how people learn online so that we can build better LibGuides and products like that for those distant students. So yeah, not just the distance learning librarian, but all of us doing those kinds of things, because we are reaching more students off campus who may, or even on campus, who choose not to visit us necessarily. Chat reference has been around for ages, but that's another way we continue to reach people, and we all continue to we continue to use that and look for ways we can enhance that. I know we're looking at how we might use Adobe Connect, which of course you all use in your program, but for providing a reference consultation. That's something that some libraries do. We haven't done, our distance learning librarian does things like that, but the rest of us haven't done a whole lot of things like that yet. But I think that will come with time. But yeah, we all will have to be more cognizant of our distance role as the number of the number of online courses increase, and those enrollments continue to rise. And as far as the scholarly publishing, that's a huge new role for us, and it's really exciting. We have UK Knowledge here on campus. If any of you are doing a thesis, I hope you would consider publishing your thesis in that fashion. As more and more journals go online, open access, that will hopefully down the road free us up for a little bit more time to look at scholarly publishing. I know in UK Knowledge we have some campus journals, some departments on campus who publish a journal through that system, conference proceedings and those kinds of things. So it allows librarians to get a little bit more into that scholarly publishing role, but it further entwines us in the research mission of a university, because we are providing, direct, well-designed, described access to scholarly materials that are created on campus.
This is kind of a strange question tangent, and following up to that, you mentioned UK Knowledge. What is your specific information, like intellectual property rights policy when it comes to student publications and how does that work?
Ooh, that's
I'm sorry. I had some experience as a student kind of board member when we were at my undergrad college, when we were putting together some of our intellectual property rights policy materials for the SACS review when they came in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wondered how you're handling that kind of aspect of student publishing and things of that nature on campus.
We do have someone who deals with the repository directly. He would be a much better person to ask than me. because I know these kinds of things come up, especially, as you're thinking about, publishing your dissertation or theses, what kind of copyright, statement, what kind of rights do I want to set up for it, what if I want to publish it somewhere else later on, there are myriad legal issues involved with that, which is not something I know very much about. But Adrian Ho is the librarian who manages UK Knowledge, and could probably provide more insight on that.
Thank you.
This is great. There's lots of questions. This is terrific.
Everyone's kind of, you got any questions? Anything?
Funniest thing that's ever happened to you on the job?
We turned that off. Okay. I worked at the downtown Lexington Public Library for 3 years. That may be all I need to say. No, I was. Well, there are some inappropriate things that I shouldn't share. The funniest things that happened, but. Let's see. Yeah, probably. No.
Any experience relevant to our discussion of career development and things like that? No? Just be prepared.
Just censor.
years.
Yeah, be prepared.
Yes.
Be prepared.
And the reason I say that, I've been with her for most of them, so it was really.
Yeah, libraries are a great place. You all picked a great place to work. Finding a job I know is not easy right now, but it's been fun for me. When I was at the public library in IMT, I used to help with the summer reading program. It's one thing if you get in a public library, it's all hands on deck when it's summer reading time. Even like the janitor was helping with the summer reading program. So, but stuff like that, it brings everybody together. Like, Joe had mentioned the hubbub, the party we used to do in the Young Library. That brings everyone together, and you're there to help students, or whoever your clientele might be. You're there to help people find information and, kind of serve as a community point. That's why we're here. So, it's a good profession to be in.
Thank you, Stacey.